I'd like to invite two presentations. First speaker, Peter Flanagan, talk about the Asian Act project, and followed by Maria Gatica and Latin American Act project. So, okay, let's start with Peter Flanagan, the ACT project in Asia. Please join me. Welcome, Peter Flanagan, for his presentation.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Very well. Yes.
And can you see my slides?
Oh, not yet.
It says screen share.
Okay. Yep.
You can see the slides?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes,
I'll
yes.
start.
Yep.
Okay, very good. So, hello everyone. My name's Peter Flanagan. I'm the regional project coordinator for the ACT project in Asia. And I know that Myung-Sing Choi has already talked about the ACT project in general. So I'm going to give you a little bit more specific information about the activities of the ACT project that are going on in the Asian region. So first, I always like to start a presentation with good news. And the good news is I promise that I will not sing "O Canada." So I'll spare you that pain, okay? So the ACT project, and second thing I wanted to mention is that I'm actually contacting you from Pakistan, where we just had a regional meeting of our group in Asia. So if the power cuts out, it's because of the situation in Pakistan. So cross your fingers I can get through the next 20 minutes or so. This is going to be just a brief introduction to the activities that have been going on under the ACT project in 4 different countries in Asia. And I like to show this slide with the flags for 2 reasons. I like flags, and the second thing is that each one of the flags for the 4 countries, Cambodia, Mongolia, Nepal, and Pakistan, strongly reflect the cultural differences between each of these countries. And in some ways, the cultural differences are making this project more challenging, more interesting, but it also presents a whole new set of issues that you might not see in a project where the countries are more uniform. And at first I questioned, why are we doing a pilot program in 4 different countries that are so different culturally, as far as their food is concerned, as far as the geography is concerned, as far as their farming traditions are concerned. And I've come to realize that actually as a pilot project, the ACT project in Asia is actually a perfect place to find out what can go wrong and what things are actually in common when it comes to trying to control AMR. So as I mentioned, all of these countries are rich, but they're rich in the variety of the geography, the environment, the conditions, farming methods, and food habits, and lastly, and very importantly, sort of the political situation in each of the countries. So the project is facing a wide diversity of challenges, and each of these countries have different priorities. So unfortunately, I cannot present this presentation in person, and so online it doesn't work quite the same. But when I showed this same slide the other day to a group of Pakistanis, they were very easily able to identify which countries are involved. And so I'll just show you the picture from a recent mission that we had in Mongolia, which is down in the lower right-hand corner. And you see sheep. And if I panned my camera another 90 degrees or even 360 degrees, you would see sheep. And then you'd see more sheep. And so in Mongolia, the project is focusing on this arid land and sheep production. If you go to the slide on the opposite side on the bottom, you'll see this is pig raising in Cambodia. And the challenges that pig raising or swine raising there are completely different from what we saw in Mongolia. And certainly for cultural reasons, it's not anything that we are even concerned about in Pakistan, because pigs just are not part of the cultural tradition and diets. So the group the other day in Pakistan was able to identify exactly which country we were talking about depending on what photograph I pointed at. So this makes the program exciting, but also challenging, as I said. So I'm calling now from Pakistan, Islamabad, but normally I'm based in Bangkok, in Thailand, at the FAO RAP headquarters. And fortunately, over the past 18 months or so, the AMR group has actually grown, where we now have 8 AMR projects based at RAP. And so there are many projects that you've heard before, like Fleming Fund. The EU has activities there. USAID actually has 2 projects. FAO itself has 2 AMR projects, and the MPTF has a couple of projects. So fortunately, we have been able to build a team. I lost count of the number right now, but it's probably around 10 people who are actively working on AMR projects based out of the regional headquarters. And this has been great because we've been able to share some of our experiences for sure. And we actually have been able to piggyback or work together on various projects. So for example, in November, we're planning to have an ATLAS mission to Cambodia. ATLAS is the laboratory assessment, and we are sharing the responsibilities of our project with the Fleming Fund, where there's some overlap. And instead of having competitive projects, we're actually finding ways to cooperate and assigning responsibilities between projects so that we actually make the most of the funds that we have available. So this is the good news. So I know that Min Singh has mentioned a couple of the activities that the ACT project is engaging in. And so even though I introduced this topic with saying that there are lots of diversity, there's actually a lot of activities that we're trying to do in each of the countries. And so the PMP assessment, or the Progressive Management Pathway assessment tool, is something that we have applied in each of the 4 countries already. And basically, this gives us a status of the AMR activities in each country, and also it's a chance for us to see where the National Action Plan overlaps with the Global Action Plan on AMR. Second thing that we've done in most of the countries is we've done ATLAS assessments to look at the laboratories, to see what the laboratory's capacity is as far as testing for AMR. And you can imagine that there's quite a bit of variety in the laboratories, central laboratories, regional laboratories, and their ability to actually perform the basic AMR testing, but also and how often they actually do it. So there's the quality and there's a quantity issue that we have to address, and it varies quite a bit between countries. Finally, a third thing is, I think Alejandro has already talked about the InFarm program, and we've started to introduce InFarm on a pilot basis in a couple of the countries, and certainly it's a hot topic for us as far as our work plan. So actually, the reason that I'm here in Pakistan now is we're working on work plan for 2024, and in-farm actually figures largely in our activities. And finally, we have a tool that we're calling the ACT tool. And this tool is actually looking at the legal status of different countries, see where this legislation exists, see where the gaps are between where we think we want to be and where we actually are. And this project focuses highly on codex standards. And so we're looking to see in particular where codex standards have been adopted or not adopted, where they've been integrated into regulations or even legislation. And there's also a technical component to this. So we've actually been in each of the 4 countries, we've conducted the ACT tool, and the legal assessments are underway. So this slide briefly summarizes what we've actually done. So in all 4 countries, we've conducted the PMP, or the Progressive Management Pathway Assessment, and there are actually 4 levels of assessment. So for people who are not familiar with this management program, it's based on other similar management programs that are conducted by FAO. So maybe some of you are familiar with the FMD PMP. So this is similar, except that it focuses on AMR. And in the 4 countries in Asia, the consensus is that basically everyone's at the beginning. They've done some activities, but they have been quite limited, or limited either in the size of them or the duration. So one of the things that we have found is that when there are AMR projects, that's good. People will our countries will do testing. They'll take the samples to the labs, but once the project money has dried up, then the testing stops. So there hasn't been any sense of sustainability or growth or commitment to moving on with the testing in the laboratories on a national basis. And you can understand that, at least I can understand it, when you realize that AMR is not the most glamorous topic. And I've mentioned this several times, I'm a little jealous of my colleagues who work on FMD or lumpy skin disease, because the beauty of those terrible diseases is that you can see them. So if a farmer has a FMD or lumpy skin disease, it's easy for them to get excited and complain and make a push. AMR, unfortunately, is not one of those things. So yesterday we visited several farms in Pakistan, and you talk about AMR and they don't get it. The farmers don't see see what AMR looks like. All they know is, whether their animals are growing better or not, whether they give the animals antibiotics or not. So that's one of our challenges that we found, and we have to come up with ways to make it more obvious for governments and farmers to see what AMR is. So one of the ways that we can do that indirectly is to actually generate data. And so this is where the Atlas comes in. And I know that Alejandro has talked about Atlas already, so I won't belabor the point. But we're conducting Atlas missions in each of the 4 countries, and 2 are complete, and we have, well, actually, 1 is complete, 1 is happening next week in Nepal, and then Pakistan and Cambodia, we actually held off on doing an Atlas assessment because laboratories have been assessed about 4 or 5 years ago under Fleming Fund. So we will plan to do these Atlas visits in the next couple of months, actually, and as follow-ups rather than as getting the baseline. So, but the Atlas missions are really important for us because if we can generate data from the laboratories, then that gives us a chance to show to government officials, like this is what AMR is, this is what the actual status is, and we can use the data as evidence. You know, it's not as nice as a lumpy skin disease or lesions between the claws of a cow's foot, but it's at least someplace that we can show some evidence. And finally, the ACT tool is a legal assessment. And as I mentioned earlier, the ACT tool is already been applied, where we use local lawyers to discuss this tool, ask a series of about 150 questions where we're asking, you know, what is the legislation? Does the government have any kind of policy on growth promotion, on pharmaceutical use, on legislation on imports and exports of medicines, and are prescriptions required? And questions like that, very practical questions that say, okay, what are the regulations? What's happening? So the preliminary summary for all 4 countries actually is, a lot of the countries have a lot of regulations or some regulations, but the next step is, are those regulations enforced? And this turns out to be almost universally true in the 4 Asian countries. The regulations are on paper, but no one really enforces them. So yesterday we were in a veterinary pharmacy, and we easily could have bought all the antibiotics that we wanted, or all the antimicrobials. And it's a challenge because we know that it's there, but there's just no kind of enforcement. So that's a very general summary about what is going on. The laboratories have very limited and no sustainable capacity. The action plans will do some activities, but they're not really very well developed, not very strongly supported by the countries. And the legislation is in place to some extent, but it's not enforced. So as Minsing mentioned, the project has 3 outputs. One is to increase awareness. Second one is to expand surveillance. And the third one is to support the government to adopt Codex practices. And along with that is adopting good practices and encouraging farmers to start to use more and more biosecurity measures to ensure that their animals and their products are healthier, and that they can produce with less antibiotics or antimicrobials in place. So you can see some of the situations. The farm that you see on this picture is actually a Pakistani farm. It's actually very nicely arranged. I wish I had the photo from the farm that we visited yesterday, because I think all of you would become vegetarians if you saw the conditions that the animals were raised under. And there was abundant use of antimicrobials, not because the farmer was aware that there were antimicrobials in some of the feed supplements that they gave, but they just know that their animals seem to perform better when there are antimicrobials in the feed. So I think the point is that when it comes to raising awareness, farmers don't necessarily use the term awareness as far as AMR is concerned. What their awareness is, does the animal do better on this feed as opposed to, or on this supplement as opposed to not having this supplement? So I think one of the lessons that we learn when we visit rural farms is, you know, the farmers understand. We just have to learn how to speak their language. And I was at a fancy FAO meeting the other day, and I looked at all the people wearing suits, and they were talking about how we have to learn to communicate with the farmers so that they can get the message. And one of the things that we realized is that we were just talking to each other. So one of the things that we want to do in the ACT project is to make sure that we get out into the field, out into the farms, and actually talk to the farmers and hear what they say. And it's our responsibility to interpret what they mean when they talk about growth promotion. So that's the first message. But what you can see in this lower right-hand picture is actually a situation in Pakistan where we have people who are actually training locals on AMR. This was part of the World Food Safety Day efforts, and we're just trying to get the word out about, as much as it's important for us to get the word out, it's important for us to hear what the farmers are actually saying so that we can understand what they understand, what their understanding of what AMR or what growth promotion is. So, like I mentioned earlier, the second thing that we're trying to do is to expand surveillance. Actually, we've been meeting for the last 3 days with our colleagues in Pakistan, and what we're trying to do now at this stage, now that we've done our tool development and our assessments, is actually is to develop capacity. And so capacity development for us means developing little programs, pilot studies, and getting collecting samples from various sources and testing them. And like I said earlier, this is our opportunity for us to generate some data that just doesn't exist, and provide that to the government officials so that they can understand where we can give evidence, basically, show them that we have, that there's AMR or not in certain sectors in their communities. So to do this, we've actually reviewing several pilot programs. There's one that's actually ongoing now in Mongolia that's looking at slaughterhouse samples from, it's actually from cattle, but it's getting started. It's happening. We're collecting data. And I'm expecting that beginning of next year, we're going to have in Pakistan samples that are collected from aquaculture and poultry, and in Cambodia we'll have samples that are collected from a poultry industry in a selected area. Similarly, we'll see something, we're actually discussing 4 different projects in Nepal. One to look at growth promoters that might be in the feed that's fed to the animals, also an aquaculture program, and also a poultry program. So lots of things that are getting developed, notes are developed, and plans are being developed that really expect that at the end of this year, we will start getting more and more projects and more data collected. So finally, along the same lines, we're trying to improve laboratories' ability to actually conduct tests. It's one thing to conduct tests, it's another thing to conduct tests that actually have meaningful results. And so several of the labs that we have looked at, they can do tests, they can test for AMR, but we're not sure about the quality of the results. And so the ACT project in Asia has been supporting the proficiency testing programs that are actually offered through the Chulalongkorn University, which is the regional reference laboratory based in Thailand. But next week, we actually will have representative experts from Chula who will be going to Nepal to assist with the laboratory training there, and with the goal of improving the quality of the testing that goes on. And finally, we're supporting legislation. We've conducted our ACT tool, and we see where the gaps are. And because there are gaps in many different areas, the ACT project itself in Asia has decided that really the place that we want to focus on is is working on prohibition on growth promoters. And there's been some resistance, partly because people don't want to change the habits. And there's also been some resistance, or a lot of resistance, or negligence maybe is a better word, because people just don't know what we're talking about when we talk about growth promotion. So it's incumbent upon us as part of the ACT program to increase awareness, use the numbers that we generate from surveillance to show the government officials the importance of adopting Codex standards. And going back to the very first slide, promoting growth, policies or Codex standards is going to be a little bit different for every country. So this is one of the challenges, I suppose, for the 4 countries, is that how each country will have different standards that they will want to adopt. And our challenge is to identify the standards that the countries are willing and able to adopt. So this will be a long-term project, I think, to get people convinced that this is an important thing to do.
Thank you, Peter. Okay. Peter, may I interrupt you? I'll give you 1 more minute.
Okay,
because we
very
are
good.
okay.
Okay, very good. I'll go very fast. So this slide just summarizes some of the activities that we've been doing. We have a number of global initiatives. We have a lot of our activities are more focused on the country level, and we meet with veterinaries. We go to the veterinary schools, veterinarians, herders, and so on. And then we have a lot of general communications through websites, traditional media, and social media. So I think I've covered a lot of this information on the slides already, so I won't go into the detail in the interest of time. But just to say that we are very active in all 4 countries, working with the government, working with farmers, and trying to do what we can to reduce the use of antimicrobials at the feed level and the food level. So, summary, once again, we're working with a number of different organizations in a cooperative way, so that the money that we get from the Republic of Korea is actually, what's the word they use now? Synergized, built. And so we take a little bit and we make it stronger by magnifying it and cooperating with different projects to make sure that we don't overlap, don't compete, and work in the same direction. So that's the end of my presentation. I thank you for your attention, and I think there's a little question and answer period after Angela speaks, so I'll stay online.
Okay, thank you very much. You're sharing the good information and experience. And we really appreciate your efforts. You're doing action in an active project in 4 different Asian countries.